Welcome to the live discussion, love.
Welcome. Lovely to be here.
What are you wearing?
What am I? Star Wars. Why wouldn't I?
I'm wearing my friend shirt, so because we are all friends. Okay. So I told my people to tap the screen and share the stream to the top 15. And it's about 2 o'clock. We got snacked. Let's discuss.
Let's discuss. Let's get into it.
How are you feeling this morning? Or this
Oh,
afternoon?
feeling wonderful. Wonderful.
Okay.
Excited. Excited. This will be fun.
I'm excited too, man. There's a lot of. This is an uncomfortable conversation. I think there's a lot of people that are really, really excited about this conversation. We've got some great things happening in the posts that I've made. A lot of great discussion. So if you guys are just now joining us, what we're talking about is we were talking about trans safe spaces, and we want to know, we want to answer the question, what is so wrong with trans people having their own spaces? So I think what's going to be good about this is, Becca, why don't you go ahead and just define what we mean by trans safe spaces? Because I feel like there's a lot of like confusion about what we mean by that. And so if you're in the comments, what does that mean to you? What does a trans safe space mean to you? And then we're going to define what we're talking about. So Becca, go ahead.
Yeah, so that wonderful question. I do think a bunch of people use it differently, right? Depending on what they consider a vulnerable place, somewhere where they are entitled to feel safe, right? However, one demographic of people are going to look at that differently than another demographic of people. I think spaces, safe space, I think the spaces around this conversation are in regards to where someone can be vulnerable to attack by someone physically advantaged. I think these spaces include where someone's sense of safety is challenged,
Yeah.
support groups, things where a conversation between two people with a shared experience really matters, and you got to be open.
Shared
Um,
experience. Yeah.
sports is the big one, um, and most importantly, and it's the one that we don't like to talk about, legislation. We do
Whoa!
all need safe spaces and legislation, right? My rights as a trans person is going to be very different than a woman's rights or a men's rights because of the importance of language. And so, in my
Interesting.
opinion, those are the spaces that we're talking about.
Okay, so my view on what a safe space is for, I'm gonna take it a step back. I believe that the safe space is for, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say this: biological women who are born female and have stayed in that female reality, right? I feel like they're being impacted, and I'm a total feminist, and so it's interesting. I feel like the women's movement has kind of restarted again, but in a different. It's like reversed, right? It's like we're doing something else, and so there's a lot of there's a lot of butting heads that's happening right now because I feel like women are feeling like they are there that their spaces are being impacted, right? And so it's an interesting dynamic that's happening because I made a post the other day, and it was about like what's so wrong with trans spaces, and a lot of men have tapped into this discussion, and it's an interesting dynamic, and that's all I'll say. Because I'm going to hold that later. So let's go to the comments and let's see what's happening in the comments. What do people say to your comments?
This is an uncomfortable conversation, is what most of my comments are leaning towards.
Let's talk. Let's jump right into this. There's a comment that says, "Why are we trying to segregate? Is segregation what's happening here? What do you guys put this in the comments, guys? Is it are you guys hearing segregation and what we're talking about? And let's discuss that really quick. What are your thoughts about that? People feel like this discussion is speaking to segregation.
Well, I mean, is segregation necessarily a negative definition?
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Are there spaces that are already segregated now? Is this a part of the norm? Like, go ahead.
Well, think about the bathrooms. That's the hot topic one, right?
Yeah.
Currently they've been segregated up to a certain point, right?
Yeah.
And but really, what's segregating it? A sign, right? It's just a sign. There's nothing that stops someone from going, yeah, I'm going to use that one instead. And so that is more of a sense of safety with the sign saying that you should follow it. It's kind of like putting your cart back in the corral. Like, you don't have to, but most people do.
Yeah.
And so I think that started getting pushed with this conversation when we started going, what does it matter?
Absolutely. I think that segregation. I think that people have this weird idea of what segregation is, and this is kind of my thought because I was thinking about this last night because I keep seeing this comment. It's segregation, segregation, segregation where it's bad is that if I'm running a store, right? If I'm opening a store and I say only white people can come into the store. And so if you're offering a service and I can go out and buy it but I can't do it because I'm black, that's segregation. That's not for me. That's like, I have different views on that now. I have different views on that because I also I'm a capitalist. It's weird, right? It's weird because I feel like if people don't want to sell to me, I want to know that. Thank you. I don't enjoy that, but we're not talking about that right now. But that's the type of segregation that I think people think we're talking about, and the segregation of safe spaces is not the same thing. It's not the same thing, right? When a woman goes into a locker room, okay, or goes into a sport or something like that, there are certain things that women don't want to see. And when you are, and maybe we can segue into this, when trans people are transitioning, a lot of times they haven't done the full transition, right? And they can still go into these segregated spaces. These spaces are already segregated, folks. They can go into these segregated spaces that were segregated for a reason, and women can be exposed to things that they don't want to see. Let's talk about it.
Sure. Think about, and I had to really take a lot of steps back about a year ago on this, right? Because at first I was like, yeah, no, like the title, that's all that matters, right? Because I wasn't having a conversation. Then I started thinking about, okay, what if I'm a survivor of SA? Regardless of labels, affirming, support, whatever, PTSD can be triggered by sounds, smells, sights. And so if I'm in a situation, I'm a survivor of SA, and I see that, and I experience a PTSD moment, well, now who's right? Right? And that's where I really started challenging myself from a personal responsibility. Like, okay, well, I don't know who's been through what. I don't know. What I do know is that if I remove myself from an environment, it's going to significantly decrease the chance of me causing that for somebody else, right? It's my response.
Yeah.
I chose to take that path, right?
Yeah.
And where people who are survivors of SA, particularly by males, is that force. That's where the trigger is, right? I was forced once and now I'm being forced again. Of course that's going to be awful.
Oh my God! Nuggets. It's the force. Why am I looking at something that triggers me, right? And we can feel however we want to feel about that, but let's talk about it, right? Like and one thing that's missing in society is that we do not put ourselves in other people's shoes enough anymore. You know, there was this old saying that says walk a mile in someone else's shoes when you speak about about how they feel and who they are. And that's something that is missing in society. And so I think we need to get back to that and realize that if you've been a survivor of SA and the male anatomy is a trigger to you, I respect that you're going through your transition, but why am I looking at the male anatomy in a woman's locker room? Right? We have to have a meeting. We have to have a meeting in the minds around that. And so I made a post last night about validation and how people want to be validated. We got to validate everybody's experience, right? And so if we're saying, well, I believe that I'm a woman and that's what I identify as, I should have the right to use the women's restroom. Well, sure, but let's pause. What about the women that's already in there and has built this space to be validated? Now we're invalidating their experience to validate yours. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about that, about the validation dynamic that's going on. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, so let's expand that 1 second. Let's keep going.
Go ahead.
What if I just change the parts? You don't want to see it? I'll change the parts, right?
Right.
Then we talk about validation. My ideology doesn't match your ideology. I'll see you for what I see you. I don't care what you see yourself as. I see you for what I see you. You can do whatever you want to yourself. You can get whatever surgeries you want. It is what it is. And the problem, here's the problem that causes, right? And I'm not talking about affirming feelings. I'm talking about the pressure. Because that adds a whole lot of pressure for trans people to go, okay, if the issue is seeing my original body parts, well, shit, I'll just go take care of that. But then they go take care of that and they find out, oh no, it's these other factors. Oh no, that didn't work. And that's going to add a lot of pressure and charge to it. And so when you think about cause and effect with sticking around that part of the conversation, it's perpetuating that side of the conversation as well. Like both sides affect each other, whether we like it or not.
Right. Which kind of gets us to where we're at today, in that there are two different experiences happening. why not just separate the experiences? Why don't we segregate the experiences so that people can be in the spaces that they identify with as far as their experience is concerned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Women, biological women, have a different experience than transgender women. They do. They do. And we're going to get to the big question, which is, why is it transgender women that's like really kind of the topic of the issue here? But I kind of like that we're going to let's wait to get there, right? Let's kind of discuss some things. Okay, here we go. Now let's get back to that video. All right.
Cisgender is coined from the term.
Let's talk about it. So let's watch this video.
Let's talk about the term cisgender. Cisgender is coined from the term cissexuals, which was from a German sexologist who had a lot of strange views, including on pedosexuals.
If you're a woman who happens to be cisgender, no one is taking womanhood away from you.
But women are actually not afraid of you taking
now
away
listening back
womanhood, because you can't do that. What we are concerned about is free speech.
You're still good. I can hear you.
We're concerned about opportunities being taken away from women, males dominating female sports competitions, about situations where you would put your protected class of person above biological women, safe spaces for females in our spas, restrooms, locker rooms, prisons. We're concerned that people keep insisting this is about how you identify, yet they want to move into spaces that are biological, like periods and giving birth. We're concerned that activists are so hell-bent on protecting their ideology that they'd be willing to cover up some heinous things. We don't need you to mansplain cisgender to us.
We don't need you. We don't need you to mansplain cisgender to us. We just want you to know that no means no. That is some powerful testimony. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, right? She covers a lot of things, and we can listen to it again. But I really want to let's have this discussion, right? Why is it so hard for trans people to listen, to hear what she's saying? Like, and I really want to know. I'll be the one to ask the tough question. Why is it hard for trans people to hear her?
Before I answer the question, let me step back a second. Let me tell you the first time I learned what mansplaining was.
Go ahead.
It was 6 months after transition. Had no idea it was a thing. Never heard of it. I didn't see the memes, right?
Wow.
I've been in IT for 15 years. I'm sitting in a restaurant with my female partner, and the waiter explains to me how to use the little tablet device to order my food. Which, I'm like, what in the world is happening right now? Like, I literally know how to build this. Now, as he left, I go, why was he doing that? And my partner explained, oh, yeah, that's called mansplaining. And that was like the first time I ever heard of such a thing. And then it started getting my wheels turning. So your question, why is
it so hard for trans women to hear what she just said? If we need to listen to it again, we can. But I feel like this is kind of why I tapped in. Because it's like, why is it so hard for trans women to hear what women are saying? Like, they're not saying anything bad. Like, I've seen these things happen where trans people are saying, I get a period. Well, no, you don't. You don't, but we can talk about what you get, right? But you're not getting a period. But go ahead. Why is it so hard for trans women to hear that?
Well, why didn't I know what it was before? Because it's never happened to me before. And there's a lot I learned in early transition, such as you don't know something's a struggle till you struggle. And that's a huge culture shock, right? It's that privilege word that I don't like. However, when we think about men in general, right, there's a lot that they don't have to experience. There's a lot that they do have to experience. And when you think about why men would have a series of circumstances that would lead them into bonding with an experience unlike their own, it's kind of a pride moment to find a sense of community, right? And that starts taking over the other things. So this behavior that you've had this whole time, that might get a little loud, won't it?
Wow.
Right? And that's what I had to learn about myself. And I had to really sit back, and I started asking other women in my industry, because I'm in an extremely male-dominated industry, and I started going hey, I'm noticing this. What's that about? And they would explain it and go, yeah, welcome.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is that when you transitioned into woman, you started to notice men kind of stepping into spaces that you were trying to have for yourself.
Here was my experience prior to transition. I'm an extremely confident person. I could sit in a room and I could have a conversation mostly with my body language. If there was something I wanted to do, I would state it and it would happen. It took the day after I came out for that behavior to change immediately. And at first, I was like, that's transphobic. But then I started like really analyzing and questioning it and talking to the other women. It's like, well, those men aren't transphobic to those women, so that's not it. It's not about me. It's about an overall behavior.
Wow.
I had to start defending myself a lot more in the sense that, like, okay, I'm in IT. I've been in IT for a long time. Something as simple as, should this server do this? Prior to transition, a yes solved the question. After transition, I had to prove evolution was real for it to happen. Now, that fueled a lot of anger, right? Because I didn't know what was happening. All I knew was that, like, no one wanted to listen to me all of a sudden, and I led down to, well, the only change I did was this. And then I started having conversations and being honest with other people, and, you know, they challenged themselves in a lot of ways, but it really helped me understand how much I didn't know. And if I wasn't willing to take a step back, there's no way I would have known it. I could have just stayed on the transphobic train and been like, look at this. But it wasn't about that.
That's impressive. That is impressive. Becca, what I'd like to do, so you and I talked a little bit about kind of you stepping into your light and taking the floor and just kind of, explaining some things about yourself. And so I'd like to just kind of pass the floor over to you, if you don't mind, and just have you speak the truth. I'm going to step away for 2 seconds. I have somebody here to fix some electricity thing. I'll be right back.
Sure.
Start the discussion. I'll be right back.
Yeah. So, little background behind me. I had an extremely traumatic life growing up. I had to experience a lot of really terrible things happen to my mother. I had to be in the room when it happened, and I was a survivor of child SA, a survivor of all kinds of emotional abuse. And about 5-6 years ago, a big moment happened in my life where I had to choose whether I wanted to have people in my life or not. And none of this had to do with transition, not any of it. But in that moment, I decided, all right, first step, I got to sober up. And so I did. And then in sobering up, I had to start processing all that baggage in the past. And what I learned over the next couple years was there was some things I was denied as a kid, such as innocence, such as positive things like emotional intelligence, reciprocating love, communicating in healthy ways. I was raised by a narcissist. I thought the way narcissists treated people was a love language. And so I sobered up and I started doing healing, and I unwrapped all of that down to my core. And I realized I didn't have so many skills that a lot of other people do have. And right there was kind of a very odd realization. I realized I don't know who I am. I genuinely don't know. My identity was a victim. And working through relationships and slowly building up positive skill sets, an opportunity came up for me to build a friendship with somebody, for a really good friendship for the first time, really connect with somebody. And I was invited up to help build a road up in North Minnesota, where there's no electricity for 10 miles. It is really isolated. And in that moment, I started experiencing a lot of factors that resulted in a PTSD moment.
Wow.
And I'll step back for 1 second. A year before that is when I worked through rage, when I started understanding why I was angry. And what I realized is a lot of my anger had to do with jealousy. If someone had something, I got mad about it. And I didn't know that my whole life. I was just mad all the time because everyone had what I wanted. And I was a manager at a retail store, and an employee under me had transitioned, male to female. And I was so mad at her, and I didn't know why. So fast forward to where I'm helping this person, and I think back on that, and I go, all right, well, if I know anger is related to jealousy, what about that trans person was I jealous of? And so between the moment of really stripping down, being vulnerable and wanting to develop a friendship, and then thinking back through, why the hell am I so angry? A whole bunch of things came up, and I had a PTSD flashback to the first grade when I first had to hide in the closet while terrible things happened. And I came to the conclusion that in first grade was the first time I had to start building layers around this person. And those layers just built and built and built and built and built. And those layers made me a horrible human being. I mean, I was not a pleasant person prior to sobriety. I hurt everybody around me as often as I could. I went out of my way to do it. And so I started putting a lot of things together over, all right, so if I'm protecting this core and I see this thing I'm jealous of, someone transitioning, and this core, they don't hate the world, and this person who transitioned doesn't hate the world, and I put a lot together. And when you Google stuff like that, Google leads you down one path, and I'm not going to have resentment or blame around that. But that's when I started seeking transition.
Let's talk about transitioning.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of discussion around young people and transitioning and what they should have access to, and I think that we need to discuss that, right? Because let's watch another video. Let's revert to the source. So we're just going to kind of do this in a TikTok kind of way. So I love it. Any questions so far? Like, let's just pause for a second. Any questions for Becca on my end? And somebody said, "Why didn't you just turn to God? The world will never satisfy you." If you want to answer that question, this isn't a God discussion, but it's everybody's welcome here. So,
funny enough, my spiritual journey didn't start till about a year ago. So everyone has to get to places in very different paces.
Yeah, understood. If you had more focus on your trauma, do you think that you would have still transitioned? That's a wonderful question.
Yeah,
and if you had more focus on your trauma, do you think that you would have still transitioned?
Wonderful question. So I was with an amazing therapist, and she helped me work through just some really hard flipping truths. Honestly, if I had focused on the trauma, right? So how does this make me feel, and what was the impact on it? I was doing that work. However, what I wasn't asking myself was, when I had this PTSD moment, what if that triggered it and why? And I didn't dive into that deep enough. And not to say, I don't regret anything, but had I healed through trauma after sobriety, dealing through big moments in sobriety, would it ended differently? Probably not, because I was unlearning who I was.
If you're under 18, should you not be able to make the transition decision until you're 18?
I think, okay, here's my high level to that question.
That too.
And it's going to be triggering for a lot of people. So
good.
One of my children, my first child, is a survivor of vaccine injury. It is what it is. And as a parent, I was scared, and I listened to what doctors told me, and I followed what everyone else told me I should do, and it still had an injury. So then I started learning. And the point of me bringing that up is I had to work through a lot of guilt with that. I'm supposed to be this protector, and I let everyone else influence me, and it resulted in this, and there's no level of accountability with it. So when the question comes up, should children under 18 be allowed to do that? I think about accountability. If they are the parents going to be fully accountable for it if it causes a problem later? And that's the part of the conversation I don't think we're talking about. I mean, every parent wants to support their kids. They're scared. Their kid is going through some stuff. They're saying horrible things.
Right.
And of course, you want nothing but to keep them safe, but they don't know what they don't know. And you're supposed to have a lot of wisdom there, but accountability is important.
So let's push the conversation forward. Here's our next video that I want us to take a moment and pause and reflect on. Where is it at? Right here. Boom, boom, boom.
Let's discuss.
Thanks, buddy.
You know how I know that what they're attempting to push right now on the kids is incredibly dangerous for public health? There's a 75+% approximately chance that children with gender dysphoria don't have it into adulthood. You can look this up, fact check me. Even the trans community knows this, right? So there's like an 80% chance the person's going to recover from that and live a normal life, completely normal. However, if you start treating them when they're children because they say that they're trans or something, the trans community has the highest suicide attempt rate in the U.S. Imagine treating somebody that has a form of cancer that goes away on its own by the time they reach 18, but you treat it with the most aggressive form of chemotherapy ever that leaves them permanently maimed.
Let's discuss. Let's discuss. What are your thoughts? What do you got to say on that? I think so this now brings us back to body dysphoria, right? Is gender dysphoria, right? Gender dysphoria. Let's talk about gender dysphoria. What are your thoughts on gender dysphoria? Because you clearly, you and I have had some private conversations, and I'd love for you to take a moment and just kind of like talk about gender dysphoria and how it's affected you. And what do you have to say about what he said?
So I've led a lot of support groups with trans folk, and a lot of key language gets parroted. And I don't want to invalidate anyone with this conversation, nor do I want this to be a form of weaponization, okay, for anyone listening. But let's not think about I was born in the wrong body parts. Let's think I was born in the wrong body. Okay, what's the root of that ideology? I feel alienated in my body. I don't like what I see in the mirror with how I feel, okay? Those are the kind of the feelings behind it. Get rid of the words. For people who haven't gone through identity crisis and felt alienated in their skin, and I'm not talking about the body parts. I'm talking about when I look in the mirror, I see a horrible, that's not what I want. It's not what I am or who I am or what I feel like. For people to speak to that, I struggle with, because that's not your space. You're proud of yourself or whatever you went through, and I'm happy for you. Trans folk or kids who are thinking that they are feeling alienated when they look in the mirror, okay. I think most teenagers feel that point, right?
Yeah.
But right now, what's the exposure? Kids spend, let's make up a number and hope it's optimistic, 70%, 80% of the time online. And these complex emotions of feeling alienated in my body is going to lead down particular paths, right? That's how the algorithm works. What makes one feel alienated in their body? Now that is the question. And that's the question that people are afraid to ask because it's transphobic. You're making people question things. It's not. If the motivation for feeling alienated in your body is due to, I don't know, validation trauma, because mind you, my generation of parents are obsessed with technology too.
Yeah.
And so if a kid isn't getting what they need at a level where they feel validated, then when they look in the mirror, they may feel these feelings of feeling alienated in their body. And of course, Googling it and the influence is going to lead towards a path. But as soon as someone asks, what's the problem? Why are you feeling that way? What if it's my fault as a parent? What if it is? I don't think a lot of parents can handle that conversation. Now, is this every case? I have no idea.
That's powerful.
It's a lot of cases, and it was my case. What I ultimately realized about myself was I didn't want to see what I was anymore, because I still looked like the monster, and I had a lot of trauma around men. I don't want to be a man no more.
Yeah.
Right? And so you start tying these things together, and sure, gender dysphoria is the pretty word. Dive deeper, dive deeper. So why don't I want to? And that's what the trauma is, and that's what the invalidation stuff and all of that works up to. And it is a shame that we can't ask that question. Otherwise, it's conversion therapy or it's transphobic. Because what ends up happening for a lot of people is they do work through feeling alienated in their body. And once they accept that, what if they landed in the wrong place and it was due to medical choices? That's a lot of hard truths to handle. You cut stuff off, it ain't coming back. And so if you already struggled with accepting yourself fully, loving yourself for what you are at a hard age, and then you go through the process, you remove stuff, whatever, you add stuff, I don't know, and you find out, wait, this was the wrong problem.
Oh, man.
The problem was this trauma that I'm going to heal at 39 years old, and find out that it was something with my environment.
Yep.
Now you got some real problems to solve for. And
so would you say that
it's such a fair thing to ask, and I don't think that it's transphobic to question it. Hey, if that's the answer, that's the answer, but you got to be proud of your answer. We can't shy away from it. If you're going to do something like that, be hella sure. Don't guess based off of the knee-jerk reaction.
Okay, so let's ask the question. Let's ask a tough question. Do you think that children should transition? Now, and there's also okay. So first of all, let's ask the question. Let's kind of work backwards, right? Do you think that children should transition up into, taking the medications, like actually just starting, just like let's go ahead and go there. You think you believe that you identify as this? Let's go ahead and do that. Do you think that we should do that? And then I want to hear this from the audience as well. Do you think the children should go ahead and start transitioning? And if so, if not, what age should a person start transitioning?
Yep.
Or,
I do not believe that children should medically transition with pills or otherwise. There's a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot that we do know. And what we do know is that our hormone balances do affect our ultimate development in many, 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 many ways.
Yeah.
And you can't undo some of that.
Let's watch the video. So if you guys, so what we've been doing this whole last 7 days, and I want to thank everybody who leaned in and just really kind of spoke their truth around the discussions that were happening. I forget, it's called a Jubilee or something like that. Did a great discussion where TikTok very own Clarkson Larson was on there, and we had some great discussions. So we're going to watch some of those videos and let's discuss. Okay. Speaking of transitioning, right? I thought that this person had a wonderful testimony to it, so let's just listen to it now. Hold on, let's do, well, we'll listen to this.
Now, I totally, as a transsexual person, disagree with giving children hormone blockers, medication, surgery, but what I do agree with is socially transitioning, which means because I did that, okay? I did that in the 60s and 70s. My parents dressed me like fuck, I was a boy, I didn't have any problems because I just lived, we used to call it a tomboy, right? So that was totally, and I went through puberty and I did all the things. I do not believe children can make those choices, and I do not believe it's okay and ethical for a parent to make those choices for a child. But I do believe gender dysphoria exists in children. I had it 100%.
So we don't need this anymore. So he leaves. So there's a couple things I'd like for you to touch base on, and that is that first of all, what is social transitioning, right?
Yep.
And then I want to talk about how the older generation of who has already kind of gone through this, they look at it differently based on this one testimony. Now I am being, but we're just going to call it what it is. It just seems like the older generation, their testimony on their experiences is much different than now. Like they don't think that puberty blockers and all this kind of stuff should be existed. Social transitioning is the key, which gives the child enough time to kind of figure it out, right? What are your thoughts on that? Like, why do you think there's a difference between the two? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I actually broke up the experience into 4 components: social, emotional, legal, physical. Okay? So we're taking physical out for this conversation. So emotional, social, legal. Okay? Legal applies to social. Okay. Social. That means having the people in your circles affirm how you feel. Okay? Pronouns, names, behaviors, etc. Okay? Physical is it contributes to the social, right? If I can pass, then it's less likely that I will be socially not affirmed, right? So it's a cause and effect mentality. Because the reality is trans people know, they do know that there are, those parts aren't the parts that is what one would be born with. They know that. Okay, that's part of the conversation. There's
I think it's important for us to pause. I think it's important to pause and just kind of reflect on that. What I'm hearing is this: is that trans people, like, y'all know what we're talking about, right? Now we can tiptoe around all we want to, but y'all, and I think it's important that we pause because trans people are not stupid. They're not, and like they're very intelligent people, and so. But it's kind of hard in society when we're trying to have an intelligent conversation, and it's cut off because I'm a woman. Well, yes, you identify as one. We get that, but let's have the discussion, right? And we can't have these discussions. So I just wanted just to pause, continue. Right.
Yeah, the thing with the medical transition, I did medical transition and I stopped it. Right, I went off hormones. I stopped it. What I learned is, there's still maintenance, there's still scars, there's still things, right? And trans people are aware of this. They do. They're, like you said, they're not stupid. Right. Many people just go, that's not what that is. How dare you think that would be such a thing? Okay, that is a waste of energy. Okay,
Yeah.
that's not what it is. It is done. The motivation behind it is so they can pass, and so social transition becomes easier and less likely to be an issue, and that can come into play in dangerous situations. Absolutely. Now, there's the other side of it where it's like, okay, gay, straight relationships and whatever that looks like, and that is a component and a leg of that conversation. So as far as kids go, because that's what started this, right? Social transition is pretty straightforward. That's about respect, and if you have people in your life who love you and respect you, they'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, where it gets dangerous or where things are getting charged is that force. You're going to affirm my social transition, damn it.
Woo!
You can't ask anybody to do that. You just can't. There's assholes all over the world. Don't worry about them. You worry about the people who will respect you and love you, and you build that emotional resilience, that conflict tolerance. The physical stuff isn't going to make a difference for a lot of people. Now, I'm not speaking for all of the community. I'm speaking for a large chunk who I've spent a lot of time with. And
Let's read the room. Who here has ever been disrespected or not? Who here in the room has been disrespected and not seen as for who they believe that they are? Put that in the comments. Who here has been disrespected and not respected as what they want to be? Right? I have. I've been disrespected, right? So being disrespected is a human condition. How are you going to navigate that? Right? How are you going to navigate that? Continue.
Well,
I wish I was you. Good.
And you can't force how somebody sees you, right? What's our bias spectrum, which is how we analyze every piece of information that comes through our eyeballs and ears.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's based up of our previous lived experiences, right? And so if I have seen this characteristic of a person 99.9% of the time, and this person comes up, right? It's a regular passerby conversation. I'm a clerk in a store. This is a customer.
Listen.
And those characteristics don't match.
Listen.
That person has never experienced that combination of characteristics to go, I'm going to socially affirm this person. You can't do that.
That's not fair.
It's
not fair to it's not fair to society.
Right.
It really honestly isn't. And I think that is the gray area that we are just living loudly and proudly in right now, where it's like, and we can't even talk about it. And actually, I always say this: we got to stop speaking things into existence that are true. We're talking about it right now, and so progress is being made. So let's clock in there too, right? So before we couldn't talk about it. I'm happy that we're able to have these discussions now, and we've got an audience. People are listening, so I think that's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. Let's continue. Okay, so now, let's see. This is just great discussion. Let's talk about. Okay, there is something that there was a video that I wanted to play, and I think that I have it because I think it's important. And it's a great segue. So give me just a moment. Talk amongst yourselves. Say what you want to say, Becca. I'm gonna try to find this video because I think it's important for the discussion. It'll take just a second.
Going through my comments here.
Yeah, go to your comments. Somebody had a question, and let's see this. Somebody's question was, one armed bandit. Can I ask a serious question to you both? Sure. Ask the question. Can we talk about the word cis? Go ahead. Do that.
The word cis.
Let's talk about cis. Let's talk about cis, baby.
Okay. All right. Here's what I'm gonna tell you is that if you go look at my TikTok, I've got the receipts for how I developed this mentality.
Okay, go ahead. Speak about it.
I used cis too because that's what one does when you learn about trans ideology. And someone posted one comment, and we are now best friends. She said, "Cis is I butcher this word. Cis is subjecting women under their own category." And I paused for a second because I'm extremely empathetic towards women survivors of abuse because of what my mom went through. And she said,
"Cis, say that again."
Cis is subjecticating women under their own category.
Is it subjecticating or
Yes, subjecticating. Yes.
Okay. Sure, that word. Go ahead.
Yep. Speech impediment. It is what it is. And I had to really pause, and I'm like, whoa. Okay. So woman, and now we're using cis, and now they feel like they're being put into this category that, one, they didn't ask for. Two, it's being forced. And so I started having conversations. Then I ended up with like an army of feminists on those videos. And it was the coolest fucking conversations I've ever seen in my life.
Interesting.
And it required me to really sit back and go, huh, it's women and trans women. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Two separate categories, two fair categories, two beautiful categories.
This is a good question. This is a good question. And this is a segue, right? It's a segue, and I love this because all questions are awesome here. And people have asked this a lot. There's been some discussion on this app about self-disclosure, right? So if someone has a transition, do you think they should tell the part? Do you think that people should self-disclose their transition, and when should they self-disclose?
Yep. So if you're going to take physical out, if you're going to socially transition, would you not want to be with someone who loves you for every ounce of what you are?
Speak.
Right there alone, right? So, okay, I'm afraid, or I want to have a label, or I don't want to lose the label, or whatever. You know, if that's a motivation, fine, but labels aren't people. And, you know, partnerships are partnerships and they're equal. And without trust, you know, for me, I'm a very traditional person. I don't want to spend time with someone who I think isn't going to accept every ounce of me, every moment of my life. And so I do believe in that full disclosure.
Let's talk about it. Because you wanted the question for both of us. Here's my perspective. I'm HIV positive. Okay, I've been HIV positive since I was like 20, 21 years old. And it's interesting because I thought, well, my life has changed forever. I'm not going to be able to find who I want to be with. And at one point in my life, I clocked out. I clocked out because I was like, well, because it's hard. It's hard to date in the dating scene when you have something that could potentially have somebody else make a decision about you that they don't want to be, right? But when do you disclose that, right? You want them to get to know who you are and let them fall in love with you, but you also, listen, we're human beings. We're adults, we're human beings. Sex is a part of getting to know someone. It is, right? And so what do? Even if we wore protection, people still want to know these things, right? And I'm speaking from my experience. Even if we're fully protected, people still want to know these things. So what do? Openly dating was out for me. It was out for me. Where did I do it? Online, where I could not have an image or just show a body part or something like that. Say that I'm HIV positive, and then the people that I got were people who were like, I don't give a shit about that. Let's do it. And then you take a step forward. So there were ways around it, right? My husband, true story. He was my downstairs neighbor. We became great friends. Didn't even know he was gay. Long story short, we ended up making things happen, and he actually found out after the fact. And that's a disclosure that I've never really kind of said before. And we were dating for 3 months, and I said, "There's no sex. We're not having sex. We're not doing any of that." And we didn't until one night we just drunkenly, it just happened. And so that's a big disclosure. I just let you guys know. So, but what happened after that was I'm married to the man who saw me for what I was and loved me, and is still with me to this day. So I don't want to cry, but anyway. That's it. It's hard. It's really hard. And so, to answer that question, it's hard. It's very, very hard, right? And I get that. And I just want to recognize that and validate that experience. Okay. So anybody who's out there who's struggling with that, I want to validate that. I know for me, what I did is I used technology to help with that, right? And even still, then you're taking a risk because could there be predators out there who still want to hurt trans people? Absolutely, but that's also. Oh, thank you guys. No gifts. We're having a live discussion. No gifts. Let's be present in the discussion. There's going to be risk in life. When you walk out the door, you're taking a risk, and so that's that. That's how I answer it. Okay. All right. Let's continue the discussion. This is a great discussion, guys. What else? It bothers me so much that everything in society needs a label. What do you think about labels?
Ooh, labels. Ooh, trigger word.
Is there a place where they help?
There is a place where they help. Labels are great for having a long description shortly, right? So the label of this is this long description, and that's what this label means. Amazing. Great. I don't want to spend 20 minutes talking about it with every person I run across the planet either.
Yeah.
But a label's not who one is.
Right.
A label is a characteristic, maybe. A label is a feeling, maybe, but it's not who we are. And I Labels are great for validation. They are, right? I want to find other labels like me. We're amazing. We're happy together. Sense of community is great.
Yeah. This is a great segue, right? So let's segue now. Let's talk about sports and let's talk about prisons. Okay, let's talk about it. Right, let's really get into it. There are some things happening in women's sports. Okay, that hey guys, let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? Is there a benefit to being a trans sports player over a biological sports player in women's sports? Yes or no? Put that in the comments and let's talk about it. What do you think?
Oh yeah, sports.
And is that fair?
Okay, here's how I'm going to start this. Everyone who wants to be an athlete deserves to be an athlete. Okay? They also deserve the opportunity to excel at their athleticism fairly.
I mean, that just makes sense to me. I don't know if anybody else. That just makes sense. It just makes sense.
Right.
Right?
The ins and outs, I think everyone has argued over. Here's the deal. Gender-neutral sports, people can join it. They will. There's enough support. There's enough support for trans people and non-binary people that they would go join that league. A third league is a very simple solution that will get the support. Now, the only pushback I've had around this conversation that I really took a second to go is already sports doesn't have support. So you're taking which, so you're taking, I mean, I'm not sports ball. So,
for sure.
So you take some sports, right? Men's sports probably has a lot more support in it than women's sports. So already unfair. And you're going to split that off into a third category. And so a lot of people in the sports community are like, shoot, that's going to make things hard. And it certainly will. But at this point, we have to pick some lanes and decide what makes sense for a lot of people at the same time.
Here's what I think. Here are
Yeah.
my thoughts. When it comes to Olympic sports or professional sports teams, we need to talk about having professional trans sports leagues, okay? And we need to have that discussion. I don't think it's fair, especially for the Olympics or something like that. I do not think it's fair for records to be set that cannot be broken unless you're trans. That's a whole different department. That's a completely different beast, right? And so what we're doing is if biological men who are now women, because that's what they identify, are breaking ridiculous records in women's sports, now you set the bar so high that biological women will never. This will never be their sport again. It is now a trans sport. So what's happening is that the trans league is being developed, whether we like it or not. Whether you like it or not, the trans sports league is being developed, whether you like it or not, because and I don't think we've talked about it. I don't think anyone has really kind of said this out loud. Not that I see. So I'm going to go ahead and give myself a pat on the back. But the trans league is already being developed, and guess who's not going to be able to compete in those leagues? Biological women. And so we have to, because the goals that are being hit, women can't compete to unless they take steroids. And guess who's taking steroids? And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but who's taking steroids now? Do trans people who transition, are they on steroids to make their body do these things? To transition into women? Or am I?
It's not steroids. No, steroids are a very separate category. Yep.
I'll be wrong on that. However, the physical makeup still gets them to these high levels of degree in performance that women are going to have to take steroids to compete with. And so that is something that we have to talk about. And so, to your point, there already is there's a need for transgender leagues because that's the competition that's being created amongst women. Let's discuss. What do you guys thought?
Well, okay, this comment comes up all the time. What about trans female to male? Okay, let's talk about them in sports. They go on testosterone, and they may see increase in muscle mass, right? Here's how I think athletes work, not being a sports baller. If you're a competitive athlete, you are constantly working out, right? That's part of the deal, right? The way in which biologically we distribute that energy from working out is very different between people. And so a trans man and a biological man may have the same workout routine, but the muscle distribution and proteins are going to be processed very differently. And that's the truth. And it's the same with the trans women and women's sports. But then you think about, okay, what about a trans men still in women's sports? Now they have significant advantage over biological women, so they can't go there. They can probably compete in men's sports. I mean, they beat me, but and that's, at the end of the day, there's not enough studies to conclusively say this, but what is known is that skeletal structure hormones can't change. The way our body distributes protein does not change with hormones. Like, none of those change.
I think it's an important place to pause. And so, can you speak a little bit on why trans people would have difficulty connecting, having a meeting of the minds there? Why is it difficult, and why is it being celebrated so much like it's a woman's success? Like, it's a trans success, right? And so I think, and again, to bring it back to the overall theme of the discussion, is that why aren't we celebrating the trans success? You know, like, that's awesome. This is a transgender success.
Right.
Let's talk about it, right? So why are trans people having difficulty getting there, meeting there?
So I'm going to tell you from the lens within the trans community.
Go ahead.
Oh, honey, they are proud of themselves. Okay.
Okay.
Take the shame out of it, right? Like,
okay.
Look at this person who just, everyone is socially accepting them. Look at them just be the athlete that they deserve to be.
Yes.
And there is not a damn thing wrong with that.
Within their identity.
Within their identity.
Yes.
Where it gets troublesome is where they basically kicked an entire group of people out of their own sport. So great, you're awesome, you feel great. This person, not so much. And then the charge gets put in place. Like, fuck them if they're not going to accept me. They're transphobic and all these other things. No, they're not. They're hurt. They're hurt. And I get that you feel good, but it was at the outcome of them getting hurt.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why they can't get there. Other trans folks, I can't understand it.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that. No, so that's gonna be towards the end of our discussion, because I think we have some really tough questions that are going to come up at the end of the discussion, and we're going to really kind of get to the nitty gritty of it. But what we're doing right now is we're just observing the situation as it is right now. Let's segue into prisons, right? Let's segue into prisons and how women prisons are being affected by trans women who are, they did the crime, they got to do the time, right? But women are getting pregnant now. I'm going to just call a spade a spade. What I have heard is that women are getting pregnant in prison, right? Because trans women are in there as well. And again, just because you're trans doesn't mean that you've done the full shebang, right? You haven't got everything, done like, and actually, let's pause. What is the percentage? I don't know if you know, but like, do a lot of trans men do the full transition, or like, is it half of them do it, or just like what are your thoughts around that?
It's not the majority. They'll do top surgery. Very few do bottom surgery. Not very few, but it's certainly not a majority number. No. That's
important. That is so important. So for anybody who doesn't know, what that means is that they may have the woman upstairs, but it's still men downstairs. It's still very manly downstairs, and that can be problematic in these spaces because, hey, if a woman is traumatized by the male anatomy, they don't want to see that in the locker room. If there's little girls in a woman's locker room, they don't want to see a man's anatomy. They don't, and I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want my nieces to see a male anatomy in a space where she's supposed to see other people that look like her. Right? This is important discussion, and we have to get there. Right? We have to get there. So there's that. Right? So let's talk about prisons and trans women in women's prisons. What I've heard is that women are getting pregnant. Now, keep in mind, I haven't heard any SA. I haven't heard any SA. It's all been consensual as far as what I'm concerned. But the risk of SA is there, and so I want to talk about that. Is that okay for women who are in prison in confined spaces? Come on now. Like, I'm getting traumatized. I'm feeling untriggered by this right now, right? Is it okay for women who are in confined spaces? I don't care what crime they've done. Is it okay for them to be potentially victimized because somebody identifies as a woman? Let's talk about it.
Well, and expand that one more second. So let's say it is all consensual. It's another baby born in prison, which isn't helping any situation, right? And so do we need to have that conversation as far as how we handle that system now? Like, we need to reduce all possibility of a baby being born in prison, regardless of SA or consensual. That was the one comment that stuck out to me, was like, yeah, that's ultimately the outcome, isn't it? Like, here's this kid that's going to be born into the world, and that's going to be their origin story. And I think it's important to think about that.
Thank you for bringing that back. Thank you for bringing that back. Yeah. These are real conversations, guys. This is the real deal. And so I kind of want to take it to so I did this post, right? So let's talk about men for a moment. Okay, this is a segue. Let's talk about men. Okay, there was a lot of discussion with men who saw my what is going on here? Oh, that's me. Who saw my post, and they have a lot to say. TikTok is doing some weird. Here we go. There's a lot of men who have a lot to say about this discussion, right? A lot of men couldn't stop talking about this discussion, and so I want to take a look at some of those. Okay, if I can find them. TikTok is like really slow. I think it's because everybody's on this live right now. It's like taking forever for things to load. Like, it won't load up. So there's a lot of men that tapped in, and it's better just to watch the video. There's a lot of men that tapped into this discussion. Okay, and so I kind of want to just understand why men are tapping into this discussion and saying, you know, well, where does it stop, right? So if we have safe spaces for women or for trans women, where does it stop, right? So I kind of want to just pick your brain on that, and why. And for anybody in the comments, why do you think men are having a hard time dealing with having safe trans spaces? Let's talk about that. Let's get weird a little bit. Okay?
Yeah, we're gonna
having a hard time accepting the fact that we might need trans safe spaces. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, let's get weird. Let's get weird.
Let's get weird. Weird.
All right, here's how the majority of people view rights.
Okay.
They're finite, and if you get some, I get less. Right? It's an immediate projection, and that's how majority of us view rights. And it's not. It's incorrect. That's incorrect thinking. It's projection. That one's a trigger one. So when you ask, okay, so why are men doing that? Well, because that's the viewpoint, right? Now let me expand to what I learned in support groups, talking to trans men. Because what I noticed in the groups was I had a lot of really passionate gals, really loud ones, love the energy, really quiet trans men, really quiet dudes, and I didn't know why. I was like, are they just shy? That's odd. Because men aren't shy, and I said that out loud.
And so let me repurpose the question, because I think you're getting into the nitty gritty stuff. So let's repurpose the question. Why are trans women the loudest ones about this, and trans women are silent? Is that where you're going?
That's where I'm going. I know I'm hitting it a little early, but I think we can go a lot of places with it.
Fuck it, let's get down. We've discovered a lot. Let's get down to to the damn point. Okay, go ahead.
So I asked a trans man. I'm like, well, why are you so quiet? Like, men aren't quiet. And they go, well, but women are. I was like, what? And they explained to me that when you think about how men are raised in the stereotypical culture and how women are raised in the stereotypical culture, men are conditioned to be very physically present, emotionally present, take up a lot of space. That's how we're raised, right? And you can go down the patriarchy conversation. You can go down a lot of things, misogyny, all those things. All of those apply to this. Women are the other end of the spectrum. Take up as little space as possible. Be quiet. Okay, so transition doesn't just fix that. That's lifelong conditioning.
I love it. People are uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable. Okay, let's talk about it, guys. Let's talk about it. We're hearing people say that women aren't quiet. Let me show you. Let me add something to the discussion here. Let me add something to the discussion, because I've learned a lot just by, y'all know me, okay? I call these social experiments, not to try to trick anybody, because everything's up on the table. I want to discuss it. I made a post, and TikTok's not allowing me to. It's just like not playing. Hold on, I think it's done now. Okay, so let's watch this. This was the post that I made in regards to why, because men kept chiming in. So let's talk about it.
So
this comment says, imagine having male spaces or white spaces? There's your answer, right? And that was in response to this. Let's just back it up. And since we get into it, let's just get into it. So I did this post.
I have Savannah and Becca to thank for the discussion that I'd like to start on TikTok. And that is, quiet heart out loud, what is so wrong with trans people having their own spaces? Whether it be terms, bathrooms, locker rooms, whatever it may be. What's the benefit of having your own spaces? Stitch this and tell me that. The discussion is for transgender individuals, but it's open to everyone. Stitch this and tell me the benefit of having trans.
So I go on to say that I related to embracing. I don't care about my thing. How many women responded to that? Just a guess. How many of you guys think that women were the biggest ones to respond to that? I'll go ahead and answer it. They weren't. One woman chimed in and spoke about it. The rest of the people who spoke up, who weren't silent about it, were men. We need to pause, women. We need to pause. And we need to look around. We need to read the room for a second. Women are very quiet about this. They're very, now they're very loud when it comes to like, hey, I'm trying to. I feel like you're impeding on my space. But when we're talking about the solution, women weren't there, right? Like, why? What would be the benefit? Now, I'm just making an observation. I'm not saying anything, right? But now let's push the conversation forward. So men kept chiming in, and this is what I had to say about men. And then I'm going to get to my damn point, okay? So
let's talk about
this says, imagine having male spaces, because men spoke up, or having white spaces. So this is what I said.
So let's talk about this. So men are having a hard time understanding exactly what's going on in this post. So I'm going to make something very clear. First, I think it's important for us to understand that men's safe spaces were the first safe spaces to ever exist in society. I'm going to go ahead and make the assumption that we, as men, understand what I'm talking about. Men's clubs have been here, and they've been a safe space for men. And to push that conversation forward, those safe spaces, those men's safe spaces, first started out as white men's safe spaces. I'm pretty sure that we don't have to discuss that any further. And now the final push. And this one, let me pause.
That note that comes up, it reads this. It says, register for the event, thank you. Open your minds and stop centering yourself in women's discussions, okay? This is what women are screaming and men aren't listening, okay? Read that again. Here's my final thought.
Men for the life of women have always tried to get into spaces, mind, body, and soul. If it does not apply, tap out. It's not about you.
It's not about you, okay? But men are the loudest ones speaking. Isn't it weird, okay? Or just not weird, but can we just pause? Men are the loudest ones speaking and talking over the woman's experience. This includes biological men and men who now identify as women. You have to pause and just read the damn room, okay? Why are we centering ourselves in women's discussion? And if you truly identify as a woman, how are you not connected with that? That's the point that I'm trying to make. And so I don't know if that resonates with people. I don't know if that's clear, but it's very, very clear who's speaking and who's not being able to speak. And men, both biological and those who now identify as women, have the floor and won't stop talking. Women are being talked over. That's the discussion, and that honestly, that brings us to what this is all about. And this is why I feel like it's important for us to have trans safe spaces, because your experience is not the experience of women. It's not. Your experience is actually the experience of men, and men have been trying to say something for a very, very long time. And what's interesting, and let's just push that conversation one step forward. I did a little fun live last night that really kind of showed me a different element, because men were upset about that post. Men were very much upset about that post, and I took it lightly at first, right? And I kind of gaslit it, and I'll be the first one to admit when I probably did something that I should not have done. I gaslit it, right? But then after having the conversations last night, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe men truly feel like they haven't been heard. And could this same feeling in biological men be transitioning into transgender women, and they feel like, well, I haven't been heard as a man, as a biological man, and I'm not being heard as a trans woman. And so that's why I'm a woman, and I don't care what you say. It's important that we pause. Thoughts? Go ahead. That's my observation.
Yes. My commenters are saying that you shouldn't be not letting me talk, and I'm just going to clarify with my commenters that we are talking. Like, this isn't. Let's be real clear.
Thank you, baby. Thank you.
Yeah, you got two like minds trying to really push people.
And we've been talking.
Yeah. If I wanted to talk, I would talk, which brings me to my point.
Go ahead.
Men can talk. Men can get the space they want. I did. You can. You do. Women still haven't quite gotten there yet. And that's not due to shame or inability. It's not. Okay? Now, we can deny all kinds of things and we can affirm all kinds of things from patriarchy and misogyny. And that's not what this conversation's about. What it's about is my experience. Like I said, I could sit in a room and use my body language to get exactly what I wanted, and afterwards I didn't. Now, what did I lose? I lost straight male privilege, right? That's what I lost. But does that mean that me and the women next to me are in the same struggle? No, there's overlap, but it's not the same. And there is not a damn thing wrong with that. I had something and made a series of life choices, and now I have something else. Women, they're stuck in that, and they got to work their way through as what they were born as, and they still aren't quite getting it. And it's because this conversation's happening. I can go take a space. Of course I can. I shouldn't. My responsibility is I shouldn't. And I had to really pause on that, and I had to eat some humility pills there. Like, when the Army of Feminists joined my page, I was like, I have a lot of silence to do.
Yeah. Augie says, similar fight, different battles. Folks, that's the nature. That's what's happening here, right? We all want to be heard. We all want to be validated, right? We all want to be validated. And the problem is that what we don't understand and where certain people are having difficulty, I was going to speak on this, is that we're not self-reflecting and saying, wait a minute, am I invalidating someone else's experience? We don't do that enough, right? I want to be validated. I don't feel like I'm being validated. I don't feel, okay, but are you invalidating somebody's experience? And if you are, what are your next steps, right? Have the courage to pause and say, am I the asshole? Am I the one who's being disrespectful? And I don't think, and this brings me to my final video of the day. And I think this is just kind of an interesting discussion because this was another one that went viral. And I love these videos that go viral. Because it just shows so much about society that it's just like interesting. And I think I'm ready to, Becca, the rest of the floor is yours, but I've said everything I need to say. I think this is a great place to end the discussion because this is like the next step, if you will. Let me find it. Where's it at? Right here. Boom.
I'm sorry, this might be a hot take.
Okay, this is the interesting video.
Maybe a hot take or whatever, but a lot of these women are going to be very upset when trans women are able to carry children due to a uterus transplant.
Let's watch it again.
Because it's coming. Hello? I'm sorry, this might be a hot take or whatever, but a lot of you cis women are going to be very upset when trans women are able to carry children due to a uterus transplant. Because it's coming.
It's like there's a competition, right? It's like there's a competition. It's like we're angst. And it's like, why would a woman be upset that you can carry a baby? That's a lot of the comments that were coming. So I'm ready to end discussion on that. I would love to know your thoughts on that. And then if you something else you want to add to it or whatever, I think let's go. Talk about it. Let's discuss.
Yeah. So I want us to take a step back from inside the community for a second because it is important.
Good.
Trans people deserve to be parents. I'm a parent. Now, I was a parent before my transition journey, but trans people do deserve to be parents. 100%. Now, there are many, many ways to accomplish that, right? As far as the charge behind that video, and I can appreciate one side of it where it's like trans women are, if I was an ally, which I want to be clear, I hate that word, but if I was an ally and trans women are women, and they should be able to do all the things women can do, and the experience of childbirth is something women can do, and I'm going to support that because I'm an ally. Okay, great. That's not where I land, but that's great. Because I heavily cherish my partner's ability to have carried both my kids, and it was a very empowering experience for her. She was a very different person after becoming a mother, and one could go, well, trans women deserve that too. And stop. That's land where you're going to land. For me, I don't think that is a fair space to approach. I think we already have a very unhealthy depiction of the human experience, and the more that we try to turn that into something nasty and aggressive, what's that going to do to them kids, man? That's an origin story. That's generations of like, what, I was born out of spite. Man. Like, that's a very real thing that I fear can be the charge for some of this, right? Again, I want to emphasize there is a compassionate side to this conversation. And I want to emphasize that there is a less than compassionate side of the conversation, and it is competitive. You know, what I have found is that most trans people, their problem is with men, okay? Like, regardless, trans men or trans women, their problems with men. Wow. That adds a lot of fuel to the fire. And if one's motivation to transition is to, and I'm going to use my experience, y'all, I'm not going to invalidate anyone, I'm going to tell you my experience. I didn't want to be a man. I didn't want to be a dad. I didn't want any of these things. I hated myself. So I did the opposite. I went and became something easier because that was my misogynistic views at that time. Turns out it wasn't easier. But when people transition for the sake of fighting some sort of system, for activism, transitioning for activism, changing their body for activism, saying that you have something because you don't want to face trauma for the sake of activism, you're making it way worse for people who really do have to struggle with that in very painful ways. As I've repeated, if you haven't struggled with identity crisis, you need to step out of this conversation for a second and just listen, because hating what you see and feel and look at about yourself, that's not, stop making it about you. It is not about you at that point. Now, that does not justify I'm going to go into a space where I know I have power, or maybe I don't because I'm misogynistically stupid, but I'm going to go into that space and I'm going to dominate it because we're the same, but I'm going to advocate for them because they need me to come in as the knight in shining armor, as the man I've always been. No, they don't. They need you to make your own space. And y'all can have overlap. I can hate men and you can hate men, but we hate men for different reasons based off of our experiences, right? Now, me personally, I love all the men's to an extent. I know some golden-hearted ones. I know some shitty ones. I know some golden-hearted women. I know some shitty women. I know some golden-hearted trans people. I know some shitty trans people. They're not all the same group.
I'd like to tap in, and I'd like to offer my final thoughts and discussion. And I think would be kind of cool, Becca. Here's what I want to do. That sucks, man. I hope you didn't lose a lot of people, and I hope they come back. I wanted to offer my final thoughts on the discussion, and I think what would be cool is if we broke off and just and then spend some time with our own individual communities. I'd like to give some people who want to chime in and just kind of speak their truth and give their final thoughts on mine. So the only way to do that is to break off and then allow people to join as guests on this one for me. So I'd like to do that. My final thoughts on this, what you just said was that I know some men and women who are assholes. I know some trans men and women who are assholes, and I know men who are assholes, women and trans people who are assholes. And my final thoughts are this: I believe that the whole discussion around genders and how many there are, it's always been biologically 2. I disagree with that, and it's because of you, Becca, and the discussions that we've had, and just the discussions that we've come to that we've had. That I believe there are 3. I believe there is men, women, and trans. I think there are three genders, and I feel like what the hell is so wrong with accepting trans as its own damn gender? That's what I feel, and so that we can see you, we know who you are, and you can celebrate in your own success and freaking own that. And that, I think that would transcend, and that's what I say by safe trans spaces, is that the transgender is its own damn gender, and we should accept it, respect it, and look at it. those are my final thoughts on the discussion. What are your final thoughts on the discussion, Love? And then I'm going to break off and talk to my people.
My final thoughts is the journey that trans people go through bridges so many understandings between things that neither bucket can see without going outside of it. Trans people are going outside of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love you.
Yep, absolutely.
I love you. Get the hell out of my life. I love you.
Bye.
Bye, baby. I love you.